What I always remember is being passionate about sport and also being able to potentially link the principles of science into sport. And I always remember my PhD supervisor, Professor Clyde Williams, saying it's relatively simple, Ian. This is what it's about. It's about understanding all of those factors that make a significant contribution to human performance during the preparation for and the participation in and recovery from sport and exercise. And I've always held that in the background when I'm thinking about any scientific principles being applied to sport. So how does it look? Well, essentially, as I alluded to a little earlier, it was, for me, it came from the basic sciences, and then how can you apply those basic sciences into sport and exercise, and what are the impacts of those things, whether you're looking from a recreational or an elite perspective, to enhance sports performance, or indeed a recreational runner, somebody who's involved at not an elite level. And also the interaction and what are the things that we can do in order to help teachers, team doctors, athletes, coaches and the scientific community in order to prepare anybody for any event that they're participating in. So what does sport and exercise sciences actually look like, and what did it look like? Well, really, I would suggest to you 4 key areas that are reflected when somebody is being prepared for an event. And you can think about the Olympics coming up in Rio and the Paralympics coming up in Rio, and what are the things that might be of interest to the sports performance in order to enhance their performance when they get to Rio. And actually, the key areas would be physiology, sports biomechanics, and to anybody, so the physiology would be around fitness, the biomechanics would be around technique analysis, the psychology would be around the mental preparation for sport, and you could probably add to that, what are the things that we need to eat in order to enhance our performance. So all of those things would be of importance when preparing an athlete for whatever they're preparing for. The other thing I would say that as a body, as a sporting community that we do of scientists, is we actually support sports performance through the analysis of training and competition, and we also promote and research around the links with exercise and health, and that is a growing market in this particular area. And finally, what we have through our professional organisation BASES, the British Association of Sport and Exercise Sciences, is a set of professional standards that we adhere to as a scientific community. All of this is vital importance to us now and also going forward. But I just want to take you back in time. Some people think that sport and exercise science is relatively new. But this is a picture from 1961 with an athlete called Bruce Tulloch who used to run in bare feet. And the gentleman in the car that looks quite dated, because it is Dr. Pugh, who at that time was interested in what are the physiological responses of this athlete to exercise, and is there anything that can be told from that? And he was one of the godfathers of sports science back in the early 60s. Since then, things have moved on. So you may recognise the person on the left as Sebastian Coe. The person on the right is Professor Clyde Williams, who is somebody who drove sport and exercise science forward, particularly during the 80s. And what this particular slide shows is that for Sebastian Coe, his running economy was much lower than somebody like you and I. So essentially what it's saying is if you're an economical runner, essentially that's better in terms of sports performance. And so if you can have an impact on the running economy, on the technique of the athlete, on the body of the athlete, then that can actually enhance performance. In addition, since then, there's been vast amount of research that's been undertaken looking at marathon running and recreational runners as well. This particular slide demonstrates that blood glucose levels during a marathon actually decrease significantly over the period of time of that marathon. That has significant implications for the athlete, and it's why athletes actually fatigue as they come to toward the end of the marathon. And many of you will have heard about hitting the wall, where the carbohydrate stores in the body become depleted. So actually, if you do quickly look at that, essentially what you have is during a marathon run, the distribution of carbohydrate metabolism and fat metabolism alters over time during a marathon race. And the slide on the right essentially indicates to you that during that time, you can actually increase the fat metabolism that's going on within the body. That is common practice. The bit that's interested in scientists are two things. One is how do you delay the depletion of carbohydrate stores over that time? So this is in the physiology area. And secondly, is there any way of actually mobilizing fat metabolism earlier in a marathon race? And essentially, in a nutshell, you will know well that many athletes take carbohydrate before, during, and post-event in order to enhance their performance. What does that do? It enhances the glycogen stores and keeps them higher for a significantly longer period of time so that fatigue doesn't set in until earlier. And through training, fat metabolism is stimulated earlier on during a run in order to enhance the athlete's performance as well. So those two factors would demonstrate what's important in this particular slide. But I also kind of go back to the 1960s, and there were actually significant studies that were going on at that time, where muscles biopsies were taken from athletes' legs in order to look at the muscle fiber types of people who were involved in particular sports. Eric Hultman at the time and Bergstrom were interested in, is there a difference between sprint athletes and actually endurance athletes? And remember, this is back in the late 60s. And for me, this is a landmark study because essentially what it identified, and many of you may have heard of this, is that in the case of an endurance runner, the slide on the left would indicate that that athlete has actually a higher level of type 1 fibers, and on the slide on the right indicates an athlete who has significantly more type 2 fibers. And those people who have a higher level of type 1 fibers are better performers than those who actually have type 2 fibers. Since these times, time has moved on, and essentially there is now lots of work that's been done from a physiological, biomechanical, and also psychological perspective, looking at not just endurance sports, but team sports, whether that be tennis, whether it be hockey, whether it be football, whatever the sport, there is a vast amount of information that our scientific community now have and actually put into practice. My own personal emphasis has actually been supporting Paralympic athletes over the last 25 years. And I'm not going to talk in detail about this, but just the same things apply whether you're dealing with a spinal cord injured athlete or whether you're actually dealing with an able-bodied athlete. The difference is, though, the physiology is actually significantly different to that of an able-bodied athlete. And just let me give you one example of that. One example is that those individuals who have a very high level of lesion in the cervical area of the spine do not have the same heart rate response as somebody with a low-level lesion. What does that mean? It essentially means the heart rates that you would expect, whether in a marathon or indeed in a sprint event, you never see going above 125 beats per minute. And those of you who obviously are interested in science here, essentially the main reason for that is due to the lack of sympathetic innervation to the heart, which comes out in the cervical area and down to T4 of the spinal cord. So what I'm saying is these athletes have different requirements from those of an able-bodied athlete. And therefore that has created a whole interesting dynamic around how did we develop training programs that are important and actually benefit spinal cord injured athletes and those athletes going to the Paralympics. Now, as I was kind of developing this talk, essentially what I thought to myself, why am I standing here in front of you giving this particular talk? I love my sport, I love my science, and hopefully from what you can see that I've got a passion about it. But I'm dated, I'm ancient history. Loads of people tell me that. And so what I thought is that at the end of the day, who would be the best person to bring on to talk to you about some of the things that are right up to date and actually putting real science into practice in the sport field at the minute. And my good friend, Dr. Steve Ingham, from the English Institute of Sport, is the Director of Science and Technical Development for the English Institute of Sport, which essentially is developing our athletes for performance in Rio and beyond. And so I gave Steve a call on Sunday and said, listen, I'm sure that people are going to be bored with what I've got to say, and they need somebody really interesting to come and actually give an update as to where things are actually at. So it's now my pleasure to welcome to the stage Dr. Steve Ingham.
What I will try and do is give you a bit of an overview of the plans that we've got in place for Rio, but also to indicate that the high performance system in the UK is on a march, and we want to make sure that we're not just delivering in Rio, but we're setting our sights high on the games after and the one after that. So targeting the next games, the next summer games in Tokyo. I'll try and give you a broad overview of some of the work that we do, but try and give you a bit of depth and illustrate some of the issues that we try and work with, and give you a flavour as to the type of scientific and medical work that goes on at the coalface in the Institute of Sport. Just to put this in context, you might have noticed there was a sports event a couple of years ago back in down in London. We did all right. It was quite good generally. That's some images of our Olympians and Paralympians. We came third on the medal table with 65 medals in the Olympics, 120 medals in the Paralympics. To give you a view of how that's evolved over time, it's been a rapid ascent from, I'd say, fairly poor performance at the 96 Games, where we came 36th on the Olympic medal table. In proportion not only to the type of the investment that's gone on, making sure that athletes have got the resources to be able to dedicate their time to training and preparation for competition. You can see the number of medals has risen almost in proportion. In concert with that, the scientific work that's gone on has had to develop rapidly in order for us to continue to go upwards. I would say, though, that now, post-games, post-home games, that it's vital for us to look to the next horizon as to where do we need to move our systems, our ways of working, and the areas of ideas and discovery that we need to put in place. Because our competitors around the world are trying to look to us now to try and catch up. So here, for example, is some press just from the last few weeks about the Australian Institute of Sport that have tried over the last cycle to try and copy what we've done in the UK, and it hasn't quite worked because they've just tried to impose it. So they're undertaking an extensive review. We've had visitors from right across the board, across the world, to find out what's going on in the UK, as to why are we batting above the average? Why are we getting disproportionate bang for our buck and investment in this area? And so I would say I'd say that this is a genuine British success story. The development of high performance in the UK, and with that, the application of science and medicine to that end. Our goal for Rio, by the way, and it's quite an ambitious goal. This was laid out for the government, hopefully to invest in us for this cycle. 66 medals and 120 Olympic medals, 121 Paralympic medals. One more than was achieved in London. That's a hugely ambitious goal. It's not probable, but it's just possible. And this goal has galvanised our effort. I think it looks likely that we'll be on course for the most successful away games that we've ever had. And that in itself will be an indicator of the maturity of the system. That's our goal that drives our system. I'm privileged to support and manage and direct a team of highly motivated staff, scientists, medics that are all working to that performance goal. We've got 350 staff, 280 applied practitioners that are assigned to over 40 teams, and that today will be working on the goals towards Rio or Pyeongchang Winter Games, for example, or beyond for talented athletes towards Tokyo. let me just put that into context of what a day-to-day session would look like. This represents training efforts, interval efforts on a given day for a given athlete. And around that, the coach will be crafting, authoring a training program that they're putting on to say, that's what I think is going to be able to deliver your performance. Surrounding the coach will be some fundamental services such as strength and conditioning, performance analysis, biomechanics, physiology, that will have various inputs on a day-to-day basis, either to the session, perhaps to the warm-up, perhaps to the recovery, or perhaps before the event around sports technology, or making sure that they're fit and able to perform the session appropriately, and general session preparation. That'll be happening now for our champions of the future. But if you take that and put that into context of a day, they'd probably do a couple of sessions each day. And during that session, they would have a debrief with the coach. We would have other services that might have an input, maybe psychology or medicine. They would have to eat at some point. We'd have to find some time for that. To and fro from the actual preparation or the training venue. They might get a chance to relax at some point in the evening, and they'd do some sleeping if we allow them to recover. That's what a day looks like for an athlete. On a weekly basis, this is their sort of schedule. And it might be that they have a day off if they're lucky. And over the course of a week, that's what their schedule would look like. And then over the course of a year, these are full-time, dedicated people that are prepared to put their bodies on the line, to probably make their mind frazzle a little bit at times as to why they're doing this crazy ambitious goal. And that's what their year looks like. But we know that if we take from a potential athlete all the way up to a medal, that the route is not linear. The route is a curvy, wobbly line of successes and failures. And there'll be certain waypoints along the way, certain base camp points, whereby they might transition from a good junior to a good senior, or an international vest, or their first major competition, or their first multi-sport game such as an Olympic Games or a Commonwealth Games. They'll also have a life to live. They'll also have critical moments in their life where things suddenly accelerate, maybe funding, or it might be that it's actually suddenly some crises in their life, a loss of a loved one or whatever it might be. And it's our job to not only just give them the tools that we need to develop them, to move their performance on, but also support them. So we have a vital service, psychosocial support, to ensure that we're treating them as people and not just as products that ultimately perform on the day. But down to the science, what do we do on a day-to-day basis? Well, here's an example of the sorts of tools that we would use to try to illuminate what an athlete's actually doing. This was me the weekend. Not really. Just trying the suit out, you know. These are the sorts of live, field-based, integrated tools that we would embrace to ensure that we get a really good view of the demands that are put on an athlete, as Ian described. This inertial sensor-based suit, the XN suit, has really helped us understand the technique delivery of a multitude of sports, and really not just put them in a laboratory, but actually see how it comes to life in the real world. We have a nutrition service that is focused on ensuring that we reduce injury and illness, enhance adaptation, and actually deliver performance on the day. And to put that into context, an individual athlete will have 8,000 opportunities for that meal to manipulate or enhance or support an athlete's progression through an Olympic cycle. And that we have to be cognizant that we're looking for an outcome, but we've also got to ensure that our prescription or advice has behaviour change immersed in it, so that the food choices that they make have an actual impact. We have a performance analysis service, one of the central services that will be out there in Rio, and they are capturing what are our athletes actually doing. Not just a subjective view of what we think the coach interpreted, but what are they actually doing? And how does that match up to our opposition? Because it might be that we're ticking along nicely and on target, but suddenly the opposition might have an acceleration, and we've got to try and match that. Performance analysis services to really get to the heart of what's going on. And this will give you a view of in the velodrome, for example, that integrated systems will beam live from track centre back and forth to our analysis team to ensure that the coach immediately after the event has got a breakdown as to this went well, this didn't go well, and this is what we need to do to put it in place in the next round and deliver a better performance in response to what we're seeing live on the day. We have an extensive network of facilities such as our gyms, and the strength and conditioning services that are being provided now has been a real boom area in sports science, and I'd say now is at the forefront of really credible high-performance science. Some really creative, innovative ways in which we can increase the robustness, the resilience of the musculoskeletal systems to ensure that we're actually being able to generate more power, or reduce our fatigue and during an event. And so hugely creative services of strength and conditioning. The winning mindset, how an athlete actually performs under pressure is critical, and we have a high-performance psychology team that will be working extensively in the lead-up to ensure that our athletes embrace this exciting event coming up at the Olympics and Paralympics, but also that they don't go doolally on the start line, and they're actually able to deliver a performance that representative of their potential. So just a quick blast through some of the key services there, but I would point one thing out, that these things take time, and they certainly take time of trying to work with an elite performer to getting these things up and running in their lives. So if we find something out, if we see something emerge, perhaps in the scientific literature, it could be in an allied field, and then we do some fundamental research or maybe some sub-elite research and then maybe bring it to life, these things can take time. So the sorts of ventures that we might discover something all the way through to actually delivering it at Olympics, it could be as short as 2 years, it could be as long as 10 years to actually get that idea off the ground so that it can actually land with an athlete on the day. And to put that into context as to why that takes so long, because you would have thought if there's a rationale for it, that an athlete would just say, well, I'll just do it then. But ultimately, the athlete pool have got a set of experiences that we absolutely need to embrace, and is poorly captured in the scientific literature. This is an image of me working with a chap called Steve Redgrave. You might have heard of him. He's quite good at rowing. He got 5 gold medals at 5 successive games, and I had the privilege of working with him in the lead up to his 5th and tumultuous performance in Sydney. And whilst he's ever such a pleasant chap now, he's quite an intense character to work with at the time, as you'd imagine. Now, I bowled over to him and I said, look, hi, I'm Steve, I'm your new physiologist, back in around 98. And he just stared at me and he said, are you going to make me go faster? As much as I wanted him to say, look, come and have a look at my boat. I know we've got the same name, let's go, do you want to try my medals on? Tell me what you know. This person had been winning despite science at times. He'd been winning regardless of any scientific input. And it wasn't my job to come over and just tell him what to do. And so there's an interpersonal requirement of our applied science team that is absolutely critical that we're developing trust with these people as they are absolutely gunning for these ambitious goals. On a day-to-day basis then, what we are not doing is pushing science to these athletes and coaches unnecessarily. We're not trying to promote physiology. We're not trying to make strength and conditioning look good. We're trying to make performance brilliant. And so everything that we do has got performance at the top of it. What does it take to actually win? And here's a physiology model of what it takes to win, for example, that you need a big engine, big potential for energy turnover, and you need to make sure that you spend that wisely in competition. And then further, you can divide those factors down. So you need to be prepared on the day. Otherwise, you don't deliver, and therefore you don't deliver performance. and then further subdivide the characteristics and then potentially some of the ideas, but they all align to performance. They don't get to make it on this performance plan if they don't align to performance. And many businesses are now looking to high performance to say, actually, this performance-focused model is really useful for our bottom line. Tell us a little bit more about it. And I'll give you an example of that. But it's vital for us to make sure that we're trying to address performance, not just trying to do science necessarily. And so when you peel back the layers of an athlete, not literally, that'd be a bit weird, but when you actually try and get under the bonnet of what these performers are made of, what we find is that there's an N=1 across the board. I've had the chance to work with our top 800 metres over the last 800 metre runners over the last 20 years. They're all different. I can't say you're the same as you, so you should be doing the same as them. And so whilst we might take cohort observations, cross-sectional views, we might look to try and assess the effectiveness of an intervention on a group. Ultimately, we're trying to innovate and individualise the inputs based on a scientific set of principles and observations that we're making on these types of people. But critically, and I've had the honour of working with these guys for 12 years now, Jessica Ennis-Hill and Tony Minicello, critically, on the day, on a crash mat, lounging about potentially up at the Sheffield Indoor Arena, is where the actual work happens. Not necessarily in the dusty laboratories or back at base reading. It's about trying to work out, how can I bring this to life for you so that you can benefit, not necessarily that scientific understanding benefits, that you can benefit. So here's an example. I've got my what it takes to win model. I've got my performance plan. This is some footage of a chap called Mo Farah. He's in our laboratories based out of Loughborough. He's running at 24 kilometres an hour. So if you get a chance to go on the treadmills at the gym, put 24 kilometres an hour. Do have a go. It's ever so much fun. He'll run his 10 kilometres around 22.5 kilometres an hour. To you and I, that's legging it. This is, and he is on a video loop here. So just to put that into context. But anyway, the point being is that we might hone in, and we did for Mo, on haemoglobin. We think that there's something in here that we think that you can benefit from an improvement in haemoglobin mass. Let's have a look at the literature. It's highly related to your maximum oxygen uptake, which is highly related to your ability to run fast. And we'll look at different interventions, such as altitude interventions. And we're not interested in doping, obviously. We're looking at live high, train low. Do we go to altitude, or do we actually simulate hypoxic environments and train at low environments? And we can see there are different responders and non-responders. And for us to try and work out to say, we're not satisfied with non-responders. Non-responders doesn't mean to us, oh, let's just give up. Everyone's different. Let's try and work this out. And through a certain set of tests, such as carbon monoxide rebreathing technique, we've got a really good understanding of how this individual athlete tracks over time and what that person needs in different types of training interventions, use of Kenya as a high altitude venue, or at the moment, it'd be Font-Romeu in France, different types of venues that give us different interventions that can give that person a specific individualized support program. And that's the loop, working based from performance first, identifying factors that might limit performance, then working through the science, problem solving, and individualizing it for the athlete. Lastly, and this isn't necessarily science per se, but I think it's increasingly important for the industry of science. This is a pictorial graphical representation of highs and lows throughout my career of working with these sorts of people, and at times them giving me a really hard time, or saying, actually, you've got a great idea, let's go for it, let's try and work it out, and successes and failures based on whether that idea works or not. And at various times, people saying, what's all this science business all about? or actually, I don't want to work with you anymore. And so applied science is about bringing science to life for other people. And in our industry, unless we confront not only factors that determine performance like technique or your physiology, but our own performance, about how we can influence others, we think there's a problem. We think there's a problem brewing because when we sit at interview, we see a lack of vocational skill. We see people who have been trained effectively to research or to find things out, but not bring that knowledge to life. And these are the things that we see as deficient generally in the graduate pool and that we're concerned about. Self-awareness, the ability to reflect, the ability to work with others, develop rapport, as well as the ability to communicate in different ways, different learning styles, how you could influence somebody who's aggressively looking to find out whether you can make them go faster or not. Coaching people, mentoring people, or personal leadership, let alone leading people and holding a task and taking people with you. These core skills, I think, that our system needs to do more in developing. I'll give you an illustration of that on the ground just to wrap up. My job as a sports scientist, working with a team, is to bring science and understanding forward. It might be from literature, it might be from the observations that I take on an athlete. I've already got to do some thinking about, is this a good idea or not? Is this going to be relevant? Is this going to have any traction with the sport? And I potentially might discuss that idea with the coach as our key client that would prescribe something for an athlete. It might be that they say, I'm not sure, I don't get it, I'm not quite sure what you mean, or I don't think that's right, not at the moment. And so you might have to repackage the idea. Or it could be that you think, they've got a point actually, I'll back off that idea. Or the coach might say, okay, I think this is viable, I think this is something we should try and do. We need to progress this idea, integrate it, and with that comes an education, and I say education in the broadest sense, because we might be working with Oxbridge graduates in the rowing team, we might be talking about travelling communities in the boxing team, and having a range of different ways in which we'd educate people. So obviously, we need a logical mathematical intelligence, is to discern as to whether an idea is useful or not. We would also need to exhibit and demonstrate and have high competence in the intrapersonal skills on a day-to-day basis, and personal reflection and introspection. We would have to have the verbal linguistic intelligences, interpersonal skills to be able to make sure that the way we present data, the way we present information is relevant to that particular coach with a different learning style. It might be that we've got to undertake further analysis as we go, or it might be that in certain disciplines such as physiotherapy or performance analysis, we might actually demonstrate some sort of physical ability that we would need to show. And then continual education and reinforcement, being able to take that call, say, I just don't think this is going to work, and to be able to explain and reinforce ideas. I remember receiving logical mathematical training when I was at university, when I did my PhD. That's what I was schooled on. I don't remember all of this other development, and that is the bit that finds out whether someone's an effective applied practitioner in the high-performance system, not necessarily your ability to compute. I'd like to thank you at that point. I have got a book out just in the last couple of weeks. It's a bit too much, but it addresses some of these issues about the experiences that we take, but also the themes about how we potentially are high-performing people, effective people that bring knowledge to life for others. Thanks for your attention.